Hello, and we're just a few days away from some important watch auctions to be held here in Geneva, and we're going to give you some kind of sneak preview of the main highlights presented by the various auctions houses. So let's start immediately with Phillips, Bacs Russo, and meet Mr. Aurel Bacs, superstar of the auction world, who's going to explain us his view on those highlights presented by his auction house. So I know that this report is quite long, but it's just so interesting to hear Mr. Aurel Bacs talking about all the details and the history around these timepieces. Listen to the man right now.
Well, this selection here, 6 watches, all vintage, or kind of vintage, they demonstrate that there is no single unique road to happiness when it comes to horology. Let me start with the one on the very right. This is an Audemars Piguet chronograph from the early 1940s. It's a reference 5020 in pink gold. I think, looking across the spectrum of chronographs, this is one of the most beautiful chronographs ever made by any company. As you may know, Audemars Piguet made much fewer pieces than most other distinguished brands, either from the Vallée du Joux or from Geneva, and I think at 120 to 180,000, which is in line with past results achieved for that type of chronograph, it offers a lot of value, especially when considering the all original condition and its rarity. Next to it, something absolutely different. Probably from far you wouldn't even guess what it is, but it is a Rolex. It's a Rolex from the early 50s that is not your typical Rolex in the oyster case with the magnifying glass over the date, or even a chronograph. It's a dress watch with a cloisonne enamel dial made by Stern Frères or Stern Création, the same family who in the 30s bought Patek Philippe. These dials are handmade. Cloisonne means that there's little segments with a gold thread and then filled with the enamel powder, and it shows a dragon. In the books of Stern Frères, that thankfully have survived, it is described as a chimère, a dragon-like fantasy animal. Now, first of all, let me say that the companies themselves, whether it's Rolex or Patek Philippe or Vacheron Constantin, IWC, Omega, plenty of names, they didn't make the enamel dials themselves. They asked specialized workshops, dial makers, in this instance Stern Création, Stern Frères, to make these dials. Which is interesting, as you can find sometimes the very same theme on different watches by different brands. Now, Rolex today, they make, as we hear, roughly 1 million watches per year. There is no dial maker or enamel dial maker who can today supply the required quantities. Rolex is today not in the business of making a one-off, a unique piece. Now, Rolex back then wasn't yet the sports watch provider as it is today. Think 1951, from when this model dates, there was no Daytona, no Sea Dweller, no Submariner. All these iconic models did not exist. So it's actually not surprising that Rolex also entered this market for a very small number of pieces. This watch, interestingly, comes at the same estimate like the Audemars Piguet chronograph, also 120 to 180. And again, given how rare these enamels are, I think there's plenty of good reasons why one should raise the pedal. Next watch is, well, shall we call it the 250 short wheelbase in terms of wristwatches? It's the Patek Philippe 2499. Now, the 2499 came in 4 series, launched in the early 50s, made until 85. The first series, and the present one is the first series, came with the square pushers, made in really small quantities. 2 different case types are known, Wenger and Vichet. This is the Wenger case that is a little bigger, a little chubbier, shorter lugs, round back instead of flat back. And this piece here comes from one of the most important private collections and has never been at auction before. I sincerely don't think I've handled one that I can say is better than this one, because the definition on the lugs is as good as it can get. Maybe I've seen 1, maximum 2 at the same quality level, which makes this probably one of the absolute top lots, not just at the Phillips auction this week, this upcoming weekend, but probably across the Geneva Sales Week I wouldn't be surprised if we'll pass by the $1 million or franc barrier with ease. I wouldn't be surprised. The Vacheron Constantin Chronomètre Royal is, I think, one of the most masculine, elegant and understated watches ever made by any manufacturer. I love these big, thick lugs, but I especially love the chronometer movement. The Chronomètre Royal, in fact, was an observatory-rated, high-precision wristwatch. And we know this example, considered the most beautiful of the entire family, the 4907 from the early 50s, that it was made in yellow gold or pink gold. This here is the first ever white gold example to come to the market. How much did we quote on it? Well, I think a starting bid of 80,000 is appropriate, but it's very difficult to say what the first and only known is worth of its kind, because there won't be another one so soon that could give us an indication of what the real market value is. So this is a perfect watch for an auction where only a fair bidding process can establish the true value of this gem. Now, the watch that probably has had the most press coverage so far, to many, the most beautiful and valuable stainless steel time-only wristwatch in the world. It's the 530 reference by Patek Philippe in steel, large diameter, a perfect black lacquer dial with huge but really oversized Breguet numerals. This watch has been known through literature, but it's never been on the auction market. I think there's two things. First of all, I think we both agree, even though we can discuss taste as a personal matter, that it really works well. It's so rich, it's so well balanced, this dial. Very good contrast, the big numerals against the black lacquer dial. Of course, the color scheme is very sort of late Art Deco-y, but I think it also has to do with rarity. The 530 in steel are normally found with baton indexes, basically straight sticks for the hour markers. Very rarely we find Breguet numerals, but on white dials. The black dials are the rarest, the Breguet numerals are the rarest, and when you bring two uber rare elements together, in perfect condition, fresh to the market, I think you've got the perfect storm here. Now, you can buy for that amount of money a perpetual calendar, a chronograph, even a perpetual calendar chronograph, but there are 50 or 100 of them. This is the one and only known in the world, and I have to say that the buzz for this watch is quite considerable. Speaking of black dial and Breguet numerals, a watch that I remember when it was launched. It was launched in 1989. It was the 150th anniversary of Patek Philippe, and it's a reference 3974, at the time the first automatic, as self-winding, perpetual calendar wristwatch with minute repeating. At the time also Patek Philippe's most complicated wristwatch, until then made in series. It has a Hagman case. Jean-Pierre Hagman is considered by many the most distinguished and experienced case makers. And I can only guess why Patek Philippe went to Mr. Hagman, because he really masters case making at its best. And when it comes to minute repeaters, he can make a watch sound like if it was a Stradivarius. Unbelievable, the sound quality. Now, this model was made in yellow gold, pink gold, and exclusively in white gold and platinum. But this is the one and only in yellow gold I've ever come across that has a black lacquer dial, Breguet numerals, and here you can see underneath the center the Calatrava cross, the symbol of Patek Philippe. The watch is complete with two case backs. We have the glaze back on it, original certificate, and the certificate says Exécution spéciale, special execution. So it must have been a VIP client who had this wonderful idea to bring a design element that is known from an earlier generation into that highly complicated wristwatch, and it's the first time that any auction house has the privilege to offer it. We offer it at 400,000 Swiss francs, which is about where a regular yellow one with a white dial is currently trading. So we leave it to the market to decide what premium they would like to offer for this unique dial. So that we demonstrate horology is not just for an elite in terms of money, it's for an elite in terms of passion, scholarship and enjoyment.